Hi, I'm Chad, and I've been a pastor for 25 years, and I share content on doctrine and church history. Today's big question: does everything happen for a reason? First off, I don't define or restrict my views on Scripture by conclusions made first by Augustine and then by Calvin. I am not Reformed. So my view on this might be different than yours, and that's okay for both of us. Whereas the Calvinist will say that God is sovereign and he is responsible for everything that happens. I believe he's sovereign, but I don't necessarily see it that way. I would add a caveat to this phrase. Does everything happen for a reason? I will say no. But can everything that happens gain or redeem or produce a reason? To that question, I would say yes. And when this topic comes up, we immediately think of bad things like disease or famine or natural disaster. Those things happen for a reason, and that reason was instituted in Genesis chapter 3 with the fall of man and the curse of sin that fell upon both humans and creation itself. We live in a fallen and imperfect world. I don't know if you've noticed that. Have you looked around? And as long as sin reigns in the hearts of men, and as long as nature itself is under this curse, bad things will happen. However, the Bible gives us a response to these bad things, and they can be redeemed in our lives in a positive way. James chapter 1 and Romans 5 are for me the key texts on this topic. James 1 tells us to count it all joy when we fall into various trials, which sounds terrible, but he gives us a reason. Why? Because if we go into it with understanding and faith, we learn that these trials can test our faith and should produce patience, and patience will do a perfect work in us, growing us unto a place of perfection and completeness. Romans 5 has a similar progression. It literally says we rejoice in hope. That part's important. We'll come back to it. And we also rejoice in suffering. And here's the progression. Suffering produces endurance. Endurance produces character. Character produces hope. What kind of hope? He's already told us in the beginning. We rejoice in the hope of the glory of God. And this kind of hope will not disappoint. God will be glorified, and a person of spiritual character will see this as their first priority. Bad things will happen in this fallen, evil, and sinful world, but God has provided a way for us to redeem these bad things. And yes, they can have a reason if we are wise enough to see what these bad things can produce in our lives. And that's all I've got to say about that. Thanks for listening.